The dust from the stagecoach hadn't even settled when Delilah Morgan saw the letter that would change everything. Her hands shaking as she read the words that informed her of her sister's death somewhere along the Oregon Trail. That had been 8 months ago, and now she stood on the porch of the small ranch house outside Fort Worth, Texas, watching 2 children chase chickens across the yard while trying to figure out how she'd make it through another winter without selling the place her late brother-in-law had left behind. Emma was 7 now, all wild curls and questions about why her mama wasn't coming back. Little Thomas had just turned 4, too young to fully understand but old enough to wake up crying for parents who would never return. Delilah was only 23 herself, and most days she felt like she was drowning in responsibilities she'd never asked for but couldn't abandon. The ranch needed work she couldn't afford, the chickens kept getting into the vegetable garden, and yesterday she discovered the roof was leaking in 2 places. She wiped her hands on her apron and called the children in for supper, which was beans again because that's what they could afford. Emma wrinkled her nose but didn't complain, bless her heart. Thomas played with his food until Delilah gently reminded him to eat. The silence in the house felt heavy, broken only by the scrape of spoons against tin plates. After the children were in bed, Delilah sat at the kitchen table with the ledger, tallying numbers that refused to add up properly. The ranch had 20 head of cattle, but she needed help getting them to market. The garden produced enough vegetables to keep them fed, but winter was coming and she needed supplies. The previous week, she tried to fix the fence herself and ended up with splinters in both palms and a fence that looked worse than before. A knock at the door startled her so badly she nearly knocked over the lamp. Nobody came calling this late, and for a moment fear gripped her. She grabbed the rifle her brother-in-law had left behind and approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" "Name's Zachary Wells, madam. My horse threw a shoe about a mile back. Saw your light and was hoping I might water him and perhaps sleep in your barn for the night. I can pay." Delilah cracked the door open, keeping the rifle visible. The man standing on her porch was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that looked honest even in the lamplight. He held his hat in his hands respectfully and kept a proper distance from the door. "You alone?" she asked. "Yes, madam, just me and my horse. I understand your caution." A woman alone this far from town has every right to be careful. Something about his manner put her slightly at ease, though she kept her guard up. "Barn's around back. There's a pump by the door. You can water your horse there. 2 bits for the night." "Thank you, madam. Much obliged." She watched through the window as he led his limping horse toward the barn, moving with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent most of his life around animals. He was as good as his word, watering the horse and disappearing into the barn without trying to approach the house again. Delilah didn't sleep well that night, too aware of the stranger in her barn. But when dawn broke and she went to collect eggs, she found him already up, mucking out the stall he'd used and talking quietly to his horse. He'd also fixed the section of fence she'd mangled, and the repair work was solid and professional. "You didn't have to do that," she said from the barn doorway. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Seemed like a fair trade for the shelter. Hope you don't mind." "I'm pretty good with my hands, and I noticed it needed some attention." "I can't pay you for it." "Didn't ask you to, madam." He straightened up, and she noticed he was probably only a few years older than she was, maybe 26 or 27. "I'll be on my way to town to get my horse shod and then head on out. Thank you for the hospitality." Emma chose that moment to come running out of the house, her nightgown flying behind her. "Aunt Dee, Thomas won't wake up and I'm scared." Delilah's heart stopped. She ran for the house with Emma, barely aware of the cowboy following at a respectful distance. Thomas was in his small bed, his forehead burning with fever. She'd seen this before when half the town had taken sick last spring. Some had recovered, others hadn't. How long has he been like this? Zachary asked from the doorway. He was fine last night, Delilah said, her voice shaking as she dampened a cloth in the wash basin. Just fine. I can ride to town for the doctor, he offered. My horse can make it that far even without a new shoe if I take it slow. Delilah looked at this stranger, this man who had no obligation to help them, and felt tears burning in her eyes. I can't pay a doctor. Let me worry about that. You just keep him cool and get water in him if you can. Before she could protest, he was gone. She heard his horse's hooves pounding away, and then there was just her, Emma's frightened breathing, and Thomas burning up with fever. The next hours passed in a blur. She kept changing the cool cloths, trying to get Thomas to sip water, comforting Emma, who kept asking if her brother was going to die like Mama and Papa. Delilah had no answers, just prayers she whispered under her breath while her hands shook. Zachary returned near noon with Dr. Harrison, an older man who tended most of Fort Worth at one time or another. He examined Thomas thoroughly while Delilah hovered nearby, trying to read his expression. It's a bad fever, but I've seen worse, the doctor finally said. Keep doing what you're doing with the cool water. I'll leave some medicine. Give him a spoonful every few hours, and keep him drinking even if he doesn't want to. Doctor, I don't have money right now, but I can pay you when I sell the cattle in spring, Delilah started. The doctor glanced at Zachary, who gave a subtle shake of his head. Consider it paid, Miss Morgan. Just focus on getting that boy well. After the doctor left, Zachary lingered by the door. I could stay on a few days if you need help, just until the boy's better. No charge. Why would you do that? You don't know us. He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. Had a little sister once. She got sick like that. My ma was alone trying to care for her and nobody helped. I was too young to be much use. My sister didn't make it. Can't change that, but I can help you now. The raw honesty in his voice undid something in Delilah's chest. All right, yes, thank you. Those next 3 days were some of the hardest Delilah had ever lived through. Thomas's fever raged, sometimes climbing so high she thought he might not survive the night. Zachary proved invaluable, taking care of the animals, cooking simple meals, and keeping Emma occupied so Delilah could focus on Thomas. He slept in the barn and never overstepped, but his steady presence became something she relied on without quite realizing it. On the 4th morning, Thomas's fever finally broke. He woke up weak and fussy but wanting breakfast, which was the most beautiful sound Delilah had ever heard. She fed him broth and watched him fall back into a natural sleep, then walked outside and broke down crying from sheer relief. Zachary found her sitting on the porch steps, her face in her hands. He sat down a respectful distance away and didn't say anything, just let her cry it out. I'm sorry, she finally managed. I don't usually fall apart like this. You've been up for 3 days straight keeping that boy alive. I'd say you've earned the right to cry if you want to. She looked at him properly for the first time in days. He had a kind face, weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. His clothes were worn but clean, and he moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. You saved his life, she said. If you hadn't gone for the doctor, you would have found another way. You're stronger than you think, Miss Morgan. It's just Delilah. And I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding everything together with spit and prayers. He smiled at that, a real smile that reached his eyes. Well, from where I'm sitting, you're doing a pretty good job. Those kids are fed and clean and clearly loved. The ranch is struggling, but it's still standing. That takes strength. The ranch is falling apart. I don't know the first thing about running cattle. My brother-in-law handled all that before he and my sister headed west. He left this place to Emma and Thomas in his will, meant for it to be here when they grew up. But I can't manage it alone, and I can't afford to hire help. Zachary was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the property. What if I stayed on for a while, helped you get things in order? I told you I can't pay you. I'm not asking for pay. Room and board would be enough. Meals and the barn to sleep in. Delilah studied him carefully. Why would you do that? What's in it for you? He met her eyes steadily. Honest truth. I've been drifting for a while now, working odd jobs, never staying anywhere long. Gets lonely after a while. This place, those kids, you fighting so hard to keep it all together. It reminds me there are still good things worth working for. I'm not asking for anything improper, Miss Delilah. Just a chance to do some good and maybe belong somewhere for a while. There was something in his voice that spoke to the loneliness Delilah felt in her own heart. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't let herself think about how isolated she'd become, how much she missed having someone to talk to who understood the weight she carried. All right, she said slowly, but we do this proper. You sleep in the barn, take your meals with us, and we're clear about boundaries. This is a business arrangement. Understood completely. They shook hands on it, his grip warm and calloused and somehow reassuring. True to his word, Zachary threw himself into the ranch work. He repaired the roof, fixed the chicken coop so the hens stopped escaping, and spent long hours mending fence. He was patient with the cattle, moving them to better grazing areas Delilah hadn't known existed on her own land. Within 2 weeks, the place looked more cared for than it had in months. The children took to him immediately. Emma followed him around asking endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how to tell if a cow was happy. Thomas, still recovering his strength, would sit on the fence and watch Zachary work, his little face serious as he absorbed every detail. One afternoon, Delilah heard Emma's delighted laughter from the barn and went to investigate. She found Zachary teaching both children how to properly curry a horse, his hands guiding theirs gently while he explained what he was doing. You want to brush with the grain, see? Nice and easy, makes the horse feel good and it keeps her coat healthy. Like brushing hair, Emma asked. Exactly like that. You're a natural at this. Thomas was struggling with his smaller hands, getting frustrated. Zachary noticed immediately and knelt down to his level. Here, buddy, let me show you a trick. Sometimes when something's too big, you've got to find your own way to do it. Try holding it like this instead. He adjusted Thomas's grip, and the little boy's face lit up as he managed a proper stroke down the horse's side. I did it, you sure did. Good job, Thomas. Watching them together, something shifted in Delilah's chest. These children had lost so much, and here was this kind stranger giving them something she couldn't. A man's attention, someone to teach them things their father would have shown them. It made her throat tight with emotion she didn't know how to name. That evening, after the children were asleep, she found Zachary in the barn tending his horse. You're good with them, she said from the doorway. He looked up, surprised. They're good kids. Easy to be good with them. Emma hasn't laughed like that since before we got the news about her parents. And Thomas, he smiles around you, really smiles. They've been through a lot. Kids are resilient, though. They just need to know they're safe and cared for. Delilah stepped into the barn, crossing her arms against the evening chill. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why are you really here? A man like you could find work anywhere, probably for actual pay. What makes you stay in a falling-down barn helping a woman you don't know? Zachary set down the currycomb and leaned against the stall. I told you about my little sister. What I didn't say was that after she died, my family kind of fell apart. My pa started drinking, my ma got distant, and I left home when I was 16. Spent the last decade working ranches from here to California, never putting down roots anywhere. Started to wonder if I was even capable of it anymore. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. Then I met you and those kids, and something in me just settled. Like maybe I'd been looking for something without knowing it, and here it was. A chance to be part of something good, something that matters. I know that probably sounds foolish. It doesn't sound foolish at all, Delilah said quietly. I know exactly what you mean about looking for something without knowing what it is. Their eyes met across the barn, and for a moment something passed between them, recognition of a kindred loneliness. Delilah looked away first, her heart beating faster than it should. I should get back to the house, she said. Thank you for today, for all of this. Delilah, he said as she turned to go. She looked back. Thank you for letting me stay, for trusting me. I know that wasn't easy. She nodded and fled to the house, her emotions in turmoil. She couldn't afford to feel what she was starting to feel. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. He'd move on eventually, just like he'd said he always did, and she'd be alone again with the children. Better to guard her heart now than hurt later, but guarding her heart proved harder than she expected. Over the following weeks, Zachary became woven into the fabric of their daily lives. He was there for breakfast, teaching Thomas how to eat properly while making it fun. He was there in the evenings, helping Emma with her letters by lamplight. He was there in 1,000 small moments, steadying a ladder while Delilah cleaned gutters, standing beside her at the fence watching the sunset after the children were asleep, existing in comfortable silence that didn't need filling. One Sunday, he borrowed a wagon and took them all to church in Fort Worth. It was the first time Delilah had made the trip since taking in the children, too overwhelmed with work and worry to spare the time. The townspeople stared at them as they arrived together, and she could practically hear the gossip starting. After the service, several women cornered her while Zachary took the children to see the general store window displays. Delilah Morgan, is that man living on your property, Mrs. Henderson asked with barely concealed disapproval. Mr. Wells is helping with the ranch work in exchange for room and board, Delilah said evenly. Everything is completely proper. A young, unmarried woman alone with a strange man. I hardly think that's proper at all. I'm not alone. I have 2 children to care for and a ranch to run. Mr. Wells sleeps in the barn and has been nothing but respectful. Perhaps if more people had offered to help these past months, I wouldn't have needed to accept assistance from a stranger. Mrs. Henderson's face reddened, and the other women shifted uncomfortably. They all knew it was true. When Delilah had first taken in Emma and Thomas, there'd been a brief flurry of casseroles and sympathetic words, but that had dried up quickly. Nobody wanted to commit to real, ongoing help. Delilah excused herself and found Zachary with the children. Emma was pressed against the store window, pointing at hair ribbons, while Thomas had his face smooshed against the glass looking at peppermint sticks. "Can we get one thing?" Emma asked hopefully when she saw Delilah. "Please." "We've been so good." Delilah's heart sank. She'd brought the little money they had for necessities, not treats. But before she could figure out how to say no gently, Zachary was already herding the children into the store. "My treat," he said when Delilah tried to protest. "Every kid deserves a peppermint stick now and then." He bought them each a piece of candy and, to Delilah's surprise, a blue hair ribbon for Emma. The little girl's eyes went wide as saucers. "For me? Really and truly, really and truly. A pretty ribbon for a pretty girl." Emma threw her arms around his waist, hugging him tight. Zachary looked startled for a moment, then his expression softened and he gently patted her head. When Delilah met his eyes over Emma's head, She saw something there that made her chest ache. On the ride back to the ranch, the children dozed in the back of the wagon, worn out from excitement and sugar. Delilah sat beside Zachary on the bench seat, very aware of his presence in the golden afternoon light. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Buy them treats." "I wanted to." "They're good kids and they don't ask for much. You're spoiling them." "Maybe a little. Is that so bad?" He glanced at her with a slight smile. "When's the last time someone spoiled you, Delilah?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't need spoiling. I'm a grown woman." "Everyone needs a little kindness now and then. Even stubborn women who think they have to carry the whole world on their shoulders." "I'm not stubborn." "You're very stubborn. It's one of your more endearing qualities." Delilah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You think I'm endearing?" Zachary's hands tightened on the reins and she saw color rise in his own face. "I think you're a lot of things, Delilah Morgan. Stubborn, brave, kind, beautiful, stronger than you give yourself credit for. And yes, endearing." Her heart was pounding now. "Zachary." "I know. Business arrangement. Proper boundaries. I remember. Doesn't change what's true, though." They rode the rest of the way in charged silence, both pretending to focus on the road ahead while hyper-aware of every place their arms almost touched. That night, Delilah lay awake long after the house was quiet, staring at the ceiling and admitting to herself what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Zachary Wells. Somewhere between him fixing her roof and teaching her children to curry horses, and looking at her like she was something precious. She'd lost the battle to keep her heart uninvolved. The question was what to do about it. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Delilah was hanging laundry when she saw 3 riders approaching the house. Her stomach dropped when she recognized the man in front, Raymond Tucker, who owned the largest ranch in the county. He'd approached her twice before about buying her land, and both times she'd refused. Zachary appeared from the barn, clearly alerted by the sound of horses. He moved to stand near Delilah, not quite in front of her but close enough that his presence was clear. "Miss Morgan," Tucker said, tipping his hat but not dismounting. "Pleasure to see you again." "Mr. Tucker." "What brings you out here?" "Just checking in. Heard you had some help now." His eyes flicked to Zachary with undisguised assessment. "This the drifter who's been staying in your barn?" "This is Mr. Wells. He's been kind enough to help with the ranch work." "I see." "Well, Miss Morgan, I'll get right to the point. I'm prepared to offer you a very fair price for this property. More than fair, actually. Enough for you to set yourself up nicely in town, maybe open a dress shop or something suitable for a woman. These children need a proper home, not a struggling ranch." Delilah's spine stiffened. "The children have a proper home. This ranch is their inheritance and I'm not selling. Be reasonable. You can't possibly manage this place alone." "Even with hired help," he said the words with a sneer that made it clear what he thought of Zachary's presence. "This ranch is barely surviving. Another hard winter and you'll lose it anyway. Better to sell now while you can get something for it." "I said no, Mr. Tucker. Please leave." Tucker's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. There are ways I could make things difficult for you, Miss Morgan. A woman in your position, living with a man who's not her husband, raising children that aren't hers. People talk. The church council might decide those children need a more appropriate home." Zachary stepped forward before Delilah could respond, his voice deadly calm. "I think the lady asked you to leave. And who are you to tell me anything, drifter?" "Someone who knows when a man's crossed the line from business to threats. You'll leave now, and you won't come back unless you're invited." Tucker looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Zachary's stance made him reconsider. He wheeled his horse around, his companions following suit. "You're making a mistake, Miss Morgan. You'll come begging soon enough." They rode off in a cloud of dust. Delilah realized she was shaking, and Zachary gently took her arm. "You all right?" He threatened to take the children. "Can he do that? Can he really have them taken from me?" "Not if I have anything to say about it." Zachary's jaw was set in a hard line. "But he's right about one thing. People are talking, and it could cause problems." Delilah pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Then maybe you should go. I can't risk losing Emma and Thomas. They're all I have left of my sister. Running me off isn't the answer. That won't stop the gossip, and you still need help with the ranch." "Then what do we do?" Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. "There is one solution. Might not be what you want to hear, but it would solve several problems at once." "What?" He met her eyes directly. "We could get married." Delilah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What? Think about it. If we're married, there's no scandal. The children would have both a mother and father figure. Tucker couldn't threaten you with impropriety, and I'd have legal standing to help protect this ranch. You can't be serious. Marriage is sacred, not a business solution. Who says it has to be just business?" His voice was gentle now. "Delilah, I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't care about you and those kids. I know we haven't known each other long, but I also know what I feel. If you don't feel the same, then I'll respect that and find another way to help. But if there's any chance you might come to care for me the way I've come to care for you." Her heart was racing. "You care for me. I'm falling in love with you, if you want the honest truth. Have been for weeks now. I know this isn't the romantic proposal you probably dreamed of as a girl, but it's real and it's true. I would be honored to be your husband, to help you raise those children, to build a life here together. But only if that's something you want too." Delilah felt tears burning in her eyes. "I've been trying so hard not to feel anything. You said yourself you've never stayed anywhere long. I thought you'd leave eventually, and it would hurt less if I kept my distance. I'm not going anywhere, not unless you send me away." He took a careful step closer. "I've been drifting because I never found a reason to stay. You're my reason, Delilah. You and Emma and Thomas and this ranch and the life we could build together. If you'll have me." She thought about the past weeks, about how much lighter her burdens had felt with him there to share them. She thought about how the children had blossomed under his attention, how the ranch had improved, how her own heart had started to heal from the grief and loneliness she'd carried so long. She thought about lying awake at night wishing he was beside her instead of out in the barn, about watching him with the children and imagining a future where this was permanent. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It terrifies me." "Love is supposed to be a little terrifying. It means you're brave enough to risk your heart." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her face. "Say yes, Delilah. Let me help you raise them right. Let me be your husband and their father and the man who stands beside you through whatever comes." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Delilah melted into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heart pounding as hard as her own. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "We should tell the children," Delilah said. "How do you think they'll take it?" As if summoned, Emma came running from the house where she'd apparently been watching from the window. "Are you getting married? Are you going to be our papa?" Zachary laughed and scooped her up. "Would you like that?" "Yes. Yes, 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 Thomas, come quick. We're getting a papa." Thomas toddled out, looking confused but excited by his sister's enthusiasm. Zachary set Emma down and knelt to be at their level. "Your Aunt Delilah and I are going to get married, which means I'll be staying here permanently. I know I can't replace your real papa, and I won't try. But I promise I'll take care of you and your aunt and this ranch to the very best of my ability. Is that all right with you too?" Emma threw her arms around his neck. Thomas, not fully understanding but wanting to be included, did the same. Zachary held them both, his eyes meeting Delilah's over their heads, and she saw everything she needed to know written in his expression. They were married 2 weeks later by the preacher in Fort Worth, with Emma and Thomas as their only attendants. Delilah wore her Sunday best dress, and Zachary had bought himself a proper suit that made him look almost uncomfortable in its formality. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with such tender reverence that several people in the small congregation wiped their eyes. The gossip died down almost immediately once they were properly married. Mrs. Henderson even approached Delilah after church to congratulate her, though her expression suggested she still didn't fully approve. The real change came that night, when Zachary no longer retired to the barn, but joined Delilah in the bedroom that was now theirs to share. He was patient and gentle, clearly aware this was new territory for her, and when he finally held her close afterward, she felt a sense of rightness that brought tears to her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, and I'm not used to that. I've been waiting for something to go wrong for so long that I forgot what happy feels like." He kissed her forehead. "Get used to happy, wife. I plan on making sure you feel it as often as possible." Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Zachary proved to be everything Delilah needed, a partner in every sense of the word. He consulted her on ranch decisions, listened to her opinions, and treated her as an equal even in matters traditionally considered a man's domain. Together, they made the ranch not just survive but thrive. He built an addition onto the house so Emma could have her own room, with Thomas moving into what had been the storage space, now properly converted. He taught both children to ride properly, patient through Emma's fearlessness and Thomas's initial timidity. He held Delilah at night and listened when she talked about her sister, sharing her grief and helping her process the loss she'd never fully mourned while trying to stay strong for the children. By the following spring, the ranch was profitable enough to hire a ranch hand, a young man named Billy who treated Zachary with respect and the children with kindness. The cattle went to market at good prices, the vegetable garden was expanded, and Delilah was able to buy Emma new dresses, and Thomas his first pair of real boots. One evening in June, almost a year after Zachary had first knocked on her door, Delilah found him sitting on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him. He put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago. If someone had told me then that I'd be here, married to an amazing woman, helping raise 2 wonderful kids, running a ranch that finally feels like home, I wouldn't have believed them. I wouldn't have believed it either. I thought I'd be alone forever, just trying to survive one day at a time. You're never going to be alone again. I promise you that." Delilah rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and hay and the soap she'd made last month. "Zachary, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." She felt him go still beside her, then he was pulling back to look at her face, his expression a mixture of shock and joy. "Really? You're sure?" "As sure as I can be. I think I'm about 2 months along." A slow smile spread across his face, the kind that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "We're having a baby." "Delilah, that's wonderful. How do you feel about it?" "Scared, happy, overwhelmed, all of it at once." He kissed her thoroughly, then pressed his forehead to hers. "We're going to be fine. Better than fine. This baby is going to be so loved, just like Emma and Thomas are loved. Should we tell them? Let's wait a bit longer, make sure everything's progressing well. But yes, soon. They'll be excited to have a little brother or sister." That night, after the children were asleep, Zachary held Delilah close and placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I'm your papa and I already love you so much. You're being knit together safe and sound, and when you're ready, you'll come into a family that's going to cherish you every day of your life." Delilah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "How did I get so lucky? I'm the lucky one. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. A home, a purpose, a family, love. You made me whole, Delilah." They told Emma and Thomas a month later when Delilah was starting to show and couldn't hide it much longer. Emma was delighted, immediately declaring that she wanted a sister and would teach her everything she knew. Thomas seemed less certain about the whole concept but warmed up when Zachary explained he'd be a big brother and could help protect the baby. As summer faded into fall, Delilah's belly grew and the ranch continued to flourish. Zachary was attentive to her every need, sometimes comically so. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavier than a dish towel and insisted she rest every afternoon, which drove her slightly crazy but also made her feel cherished. In late October, Raymond Tucker appeared again, this time riding up alone. Zachary was in the far pasture with Billy, so it was just Delilah who walked out to meet him, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "Mrs. Wells," Tucker said, tipping his hat. "I heard congratulations are in order. If you're here to make another offer on my land, the answer is still no. Actually, I came to apologize. What I said last time, threatening to cause trouble for you and the children, that was out of line. I was frustrated and I let it make me mean." He shifted in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. "Truth is, seeing how you turned this place around, how your husband has made it productive again, reminded me that some people are meant to hold onto their land and some aren't. You and Wells, you're the kind who are meant to stay. I respect that." Delilah studied him carefully, looking for deception and finding only what appeared to be genuine regret. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Tucker. I also wanted to let you know if you ever need help with anything, livestock advice, or what have you, my door's open." Neighborly-like, no strings attached. "Thank you. That's kind of you." He nodded and rode off, leaving Delilah slightly stunned. When she told Zachary about it later, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her belly where their baby was kicking. "People can surprise you sometimes. Maybe he saw what we've built here and realized some things are worth more than money and land acquisition. Or maybe he just likes being on the winning side and realized we're not going anywhere," Zachary laughed. "That's also possible. Either way, I'll take an ally over an enemy any day." Their daughter was born on a cold January morning in 1875, after a long night of labor that left Delilah exhausted but triumphant. Zachary had stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, much to the doctor's initial disapproval. But Delilah had insisted, and she was glad she had. Having him there had made all the difference. They named her Rose Catherine Wells, after both their mothers. She was tiny and perfect, with dark hair like Zachary's and eyes that would eventually settle into the same green as Delilah's. Emma was completely smitten, wanting to hold her constantly. Thomas was more cautious but would gently pat her head and announce "my baby" to anyone who would listen. Watching Zachary with Rose, the way he held her so carefully and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, made Delilah fall in love with him all over again. This was the man who'd shown up at her door as a stranger and become her whole world. "What are you thinking about?" he asked one night while rocking Rose back to sleep. "Just how different things could have been. If your horse hadn't thrown that shoe, if you'd ridden past instead of stopping, if I hadn't let you stay." But I did stop, and you did let me stay, and here we are. That's what matters." "Here we are," she echoed, settling beside him to watch their daughter sleep. The years that followed were full and rich. Emma grew into a bright, confident young woman who could work cattle as well as any man and still loved her blue hair ribbons. Thomas lost his shyness and became his father's shadow, learning everything Zachary could teach him about ranching and horses and being a good man. Rose was the baby of the family for 3 years before her brother Samuel arrived, followed 2 years later by twin girls, Margaret and Alice. The house expanded again to accommodate the growing family, and the ranch grew with it. Billy eventually married and built his own place on the property, becoming a true partner in the operation rather than just hired help. Emma married at 20 to a good man who worked the neighboring ranch, a boy she'd known since childhood. Delilah cried at the wedding, remembering the frightened 7-year-old who'd lost everything and seeing the strong, happy woman she'd become. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations as he grew, working alongside Zachary with easy camaraderie. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Delilah back to the spot where they'd first kissed, out by the fence line where they'd stood together so many evenings watching the sunset. 10 years, he said, pulling her close. Best 10 years of my life. Mine too. Though that first year was pretty rough. But we made it, and look at everything we've built. He gestured at the ranch spread out before them, at the house full of children, at the life they'd created together. I meant what I said that day, you know, when I asked you to marry me. Which part? All of it. But especially that you were my reason to stop drifting. You still are. You and our family, this life we've made. I wake up every morning grateful that my horse threw a shoe outside Fort Worth, Texas. Delilah laughed. That's a strange thing to be grateful for. Maybe. But it brought me to you, so I'll be grateful for it until the day I die. He kissed her as the sun set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind them, they could hear the children playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. It was a perfect moment, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Delilah sat at the kitchen table with the old ledger she'd been struggling with the night Zachary first knocked on her door. The numbers that had refused to add up then now told a story of success and stability. The ranch was profitable, the children were thriving, and she had a partner who loved her more with each passing year. She closed the ledger and looked around the kitchen, seeing evidence of her family everywhere. Emma's drawing still pinned to the wall even though she was married and gone, Thomas's first lasso hanging by the door, Rose's sampler practice on the table, Samuel's toy horse abandoned on a chair, the twins' matching cups waiting for morning. Zachary came in from checking the barn one last time, a nightly ritual he never skipped. "What are you doing up? Thought you'd be in bed by now, just thinking, remembering. Good memories, I hope. The best. Come here." He crossed to her and she stood, wrapping her arms around him. Even after 10 years, his embrace felt like coming home. "I love you," she said against his chest. "I don't say it enough. You say it every day in 100 different ways, but I never get tired of hearing the words." He tilted her chin up to look at him. "I love you too, Delilah Wells. More than I ever thought possible to love another person." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other while the lamp burned low and the Texas night settled around their ranch. Outside, an owl called and somewhere a cow lowed. The sounds of home, of the life they'd built together from nothing but faith and love and hard work. The next morning brought the usual chaos of getting 5 children fed and ready for their various activities. Emma came by with her husband to help with the spring branding. Thomas was already out checking the cattle. Rose herded her younger siblings with the same firm kindness Delilah had once used on her and Emma. Zachary caught Delilah's eye across the breakfast table and winked, a private moment of connection in the midst of the beautiful chaos. She smiled back, her heart full to bursting. This was what she'd been fighting for all those years ago when she'd taken in her sister's children and refused to give up the ranch. Not just survival, but this. A full life, a loving family, a true partnership with a man who saw her as an equal and loved her fiercely. The scared, overwhelmed young woman she'd been would hardly recognize the confident wife and mother she'd become. After breakfast, while Zachary was teaching Samuel how to rope properly and the twins were helping Rose in the garden, Delilah took a moment to walk to the small cemetery plot on the hill behind the house. She'd brought her sister and brother-in-law's remains back from Oregon 5 years ago, wanting them to rest on the land they'd meant to make home. "I kept my promise, Sarah," she said quietly, kneeling by the simple marker. "I raised them right. Emma's married and happy. Thomas is becoming a fine man. They're good people and they remember you. They know you loved them." The wind rustled through the grass, and Delilah imagined it was her sister's approval. She stood, brushing off her skirt, and looked back at the ranch spread below. Zachary had spotted her and was waving, Samuel beside him doing the same. She waved back, her throat tight with emotion. She'd been given a second chance at happiness, and she'd grabbed it with both hands. Not everyone was so lucky. That evening, the whole family gathered on the expanded porch for supper, something they tried to do at least once a week when weather permitted. Emma and her husband were there, Billy and his wife and their 2 children, all crowded around the long table Zachary had built with his own hands. As Delilah looked around at all the faces, at the family that had grown from just her and 2 frightened children, she felt overwhelming gratitude. This was legacy, she thought. Not just land and cattle, but love passed down, family bonds forged strong enough to weather any storm. "What are you thinking about, Mama?" Rose asked, always the perceptive one. "Just how blessed we are," Delilah said, reaching for Zachary's hand. "How very blessed." Later that night, lying in bed with her husband's arms around her, Delilah thought back to that first night when Zachary had knocked on her door. She'd been so scared, so alone, so certain she had to face everything by herself. If someone had told her then that this stranger would become her whole world, that together they'd build something beautiful and lasting, she never would have believed it. But love had a way of surprising you like that. It crept up when you weren't looking, put down roots before you realized what was happening, and bloomed into something more magnificent than you'd ever imagined possible. "Zachary," she whispered, not sure if he was still awake. Thank you." "For what?" "For stopping that night. For staying. For loving me and the children. For building this life with me. For everything." He kissed the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for letting me. For taking a chance on a drifter with nothing to offer but his heart and his hands. For making me part of your family. For giving me a home. This is your home, it always will be, I know, and you're my heart. You always will be." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, secure in a love that had been tested and proven true. Outside, the Texas stars wheeled overhead, watching over the ranch where 2 broken people had found each other and become whole. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. Droughts came and went, cattle prices fluctuated, children grew and started families of their own. Through it all, Delilah and Zachary faced everything together, their partnership growing deeper and stronger with each passing season. Thomas married at 24 and brought his bride to live on the ranch, taking over the day-to-day operations as Zachary's joints started to ache from decades of hard work. Rose became a teacher in Fort Worth, but came home every weekend, unable to stay away from the ranch that had shaped her. Samuel showed a gift for horse breeding that made the ranch additional income. The twins were inseparable and eventually opened a bakery in town together, though they too came home regularly. Emma gave Delilah and Zachary their first grandchild, a boy they named Zachary Thomas in honor of his grandfathers. Holding that baby, seeing Zachary's face light up with the same wonder he'd shown when holding each of their own children, made Delilah's heart overflow. "We're grandparents," she said, marveling at the weight of it. "We are. And you're just as beautiful as the day I met you. Liar. I have gray hair and wrinkles. You have wisdom and laughter lines, and you're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Even after all these years, he could still make her blush. On their 25th anniversary, the whole extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were grandchildren running everywhere, children and their spouses helping prepare food, neighbors and friends come to mark the occasion. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Billy stood up to make a toast, raising his glass. "I've known Zachary and Delilah since the beginning, when this ranch was barely holding together, and they were two people trying to figure out how to build a life together. I've watched them weather every storm, celebrate every triumph, and love each other more fiercely with each passing year. They've built something here that goes beyond land and cattle. They've built a legacy of love and family and hard work. To Zachary and Delilah Wells, the finest people I know." Everyone raised their glasses, and Delilah found herself crying happy tears. Zachary handed her his handkerchief, the same one he'd been carrying for 2 decades, and she dabbed at her eyes while laughing at herself. "I'm a foolish old woman, crying at my own party." "You're my beautiful wife, and you cry whenever you want to," Zachary said, kissing her forehead. Emma stood up next, her own eyes shining. "I want to say something too. I was 7 years old when I came to live with Aunt Delilah. I'd lost everything, and I was so scared. Then Zachary showed up, and I remember thinking maybe things would be okay after all. He taught me to be brave, to work hard, to laugh even when things were difficult. And watching the two of you love each other taught me what real partnership looks like. When I chose my own husband, I looked for someone who would treat me the way Zachary treats you, Aunt Delilah. Someone who would be my partner in every sense of the word. You gave me that example, and I'll be grateful for it all my life." Thomas stood as well, his own children gathered around him. "What Emma said goes for me too. You both saved us, gave us a home and a future when we had nothing. More than that, you gave us a family. Every good thing in my life traces back to you taking us in and Zachary choosing to stay. I can only hope to be half the man and father he's been." Delilah was crying in earnest now, and Zachary's eyes were suspiciously bright as well. Their own biological children took turns speaking, each expressing gratitude and love in their own way. By the time they finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. That night, after everyone had gone home or bedded down in spare rooms and the house was finally quiet, Delilah and Zachary sat on the porch like they'd done thousands of times before. 25 years, Delilah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. Where did the time go? Into building something beautiful. Into raising children and running a ranch and loving each other. I wouldn't change a single day of it. Not even the hard parts. The drought of '78, when Thomas broke his arm. When we almost lost the ranch during that hard winter. Not even those. The hard parts made us stronger. They proved we could weather anything as long as we had each other. Delilah lifted her head to look at him. Even with gray in his hair and lines on his face, he was still the man she'd fallen in love with. Still kind, still strong, still looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. I would do it all again, she said. Every moment, every struggle, every triumph, as long as it led me back to you. He cupped her face gently, his calloused thumb brushing her cheek. I love you, Delilah Wells. I loved you when we were young and struggling. I love you now with our grandchildren running around and our children grown, and I'll love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Zachary Wells. You made all my dreams come true, even the ones I didn't know I had. They kissed as the stars came out overhead, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built a love that would echo through generations. Behind them, the house held their legacy. Children and grandchildren who'd been raised on love and hard work, and the example of two people committed to each other and their family. In the years that followed, Delilah and Zachary gradually handed over the ranch operations to Thomas and his family, though they remained active and involved. Zachary still rode out to check on cattle, though not as far or as often. Delilah still tended her garden and kept the household running smoothly. They were fixtures at church, beloved by the community they'd been part of for so many years. More grandchildren came, and eventually great-grandchildren. The family tree that had almost ended with 2 orphan children had flourished into something vast and beautiful. On a warm spring evening when Delilah was 68 and Zachary 71, they sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. Zachary's health had been declining slightly, nothing serious but enough to remind them both that time was precious. "You have any regrets?" Delilah asked, holding his hand. "Not a single one. You? Only that I didn't say yes to marrying you sooner. I wasted weeks being stubborn and scared when I could have been your wife." He laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "You needed that time to be sure, and we've had so many years together, a few weeks more or less doesn't matter in the grand scheme. I suppose you're right." She squeezed his hand. "We've been blessed, haven't we? More than I ever dreamed possible. More than either of us dreamed. We took broken pieces and made something whole and beautiful. That's no small thing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Cattle lowing, horses nickering, voices of family carrying on the evening breeze. This land, this home, this family, it was everything Delilah had fought for all those years ago and so much more than she'd ever imagined. "I'm tired," Zachary admitted quietly. "More tired than I used to be." "I know, love, me too, but we've earned our rest." "Not yet, though. I'm not ready to leave you yet." Delilah felt her throat tighten. "And I'm not ready to lose you, so we'll just have to stay stubborn and stick around a while longer. Deal?" They remained on the porch until the stars came out, until Rose came looking for them to say supper was ready, until the night air grew cool and Zachary's joints protested sitting so long. Inside, the house was warm and full of family. 3 generations gathered for their weekly Sunday supper. Looking around the crowded table, seeing all the faces that existed because she'd taken in 2 orphan children and a drifter had stopped to ask for shelter, Delilah felt profound peace. This was success, not measured in money or land, but in love multiplied and passed down. That night, Zachary held her close in the bed they'd shared for over 4 decades. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what? For being brave enough to love me, for building this life with me, for every day we've had together. I should be thanking you. You're the one who showed up and turned my whole world around. We saved each other, I think. You gave me a home and purpose. I gave you partnership and help. Together we made something neither of us could have created alone." "Together," Delilah echoed. "That's always been our secret, hasn't it? Facing everything together. Always have, always will." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, 2 souls who'd found their home in each other all those years ago and never let go. The seasons continued their eternal dance, and Delilah and Zachary danced with them. They celebrated more birthdays, more anniversaries, more milestones with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The ranch prospered under Thomas's capable management, though everyone still looked to Zachary and Delilah for wisdom and guidance. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw an enormous celebration. People came from all over Texas to honor the couple who'd become something of a legend in Fort Worth and beyond. The story of how they'd met, how Zachary had helped Delilah save her ranch and raise her sister's children, how they'd built an empire of love and family, it had been told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But to Delilah and Zachary, it was simply their life. Simply the choice they'd made to love each other and keep choosing that love every single day for 50 years. 50 years, Zachary marveled, looking at Delilah in her best dress with flowers in her hair. "You're still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And you're still the charmer who swept me off my feet when I was trying so hard to resist." "Did I sweep you off your feet? I thought I annoyed you at first." "You did both. It was very confusing." They laughed together, surrounded by the evidence of their love made manifest in dozens of descendants. Emma stood with her own grandchildren now, gray-haired but still vibrant. Thomas had taken on the role of family patriarch, steady and reliable like his adopted father. The biological children Delilah and Zachary had created together filled in the ranks, along with their spouses and children and grandchildren. It was overwhelming and perfect and exactly right. As the party wound down and the family began to disperse, Delilah found herself alone with Emma for a moment. Her niece, now a grandmother herself, hugged her tightly. "Thank you," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything. For taking us in, for loving us, for giving Thomas and me the life you did. You were never a burden, sweetheart. You were a gift. You and Thomas saved me just as much as Zachary did. You gave me purpose and love and a reason to keep fighting. I barely remember my real parents now. You and Zachary are my parents in every way that matters. You raised us right, just like he promised you he would help you do." Delilah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "He kept that promise, didn't he? Every single day for 50 years. He did. You both did. And now look at what you've created." Emma gestured at the crowd of family. "All of this, all of us, we exist because you were brave enough to take in 2 orphans and Zachary was kind enough to stop and help. That's legacy, Aunt Delilah. That's love that echoes through time." After Emma moved away, Zachary found Delilah and took her hand. "Ready to go home? This is home. Right here with you and our family. True, but our bed is calling and these old bones are tired." They said their goodnights and walked slowly back to the main house, moving carefully on joints that protested more with each passing year. Inside, the house was quiet, most of the family having gone to their own homes or the various cabins scattered across the property. In their bedroom, Zachary helped Delilah with the buttons on her dress, something he'd done countless times over the decades. His hands were less steady than they'd once been, but still gentle, still reverent. "I love you," he said, kissing her shoulder. 50 years and I love you more now than ever. How is that possible? How can love keep growing like this? Because we keep feeding it, keep choosing it, keep showing up for each other even when it's hard." He turned her to face him. "You're my miracle, Delilah Wells. The answer to prayers I didn't know how to pray." She touched his face, tracing the lines and wrinkles that mapped a life well lived. "And you're mine, my unexpected blessing, my partner, my love." They held each other in the quiet room, 2 people who'd weathered 5 decades together and come through stronger for it. Outside, an owl called into the night. Somewhere a coyote yipped. The sounds of Texas, of home, of the life they'd built. No regrets. Zachary asked like he had so many times before. Not a single one, Delilah answered like she always did. You. Only that we didn't have more time. 50 years isn't enough. I'd take 50 more if I could. Then we'll just have to make every remaining day count. We always have, love. We always have. They climbed into bed, settling into the familiar comfort of each other's arms. Zachary's heartbeat was steady beneath Delilah's ear, a rhythm she'd fallen asleep to for half a century. She matched her breathing to his, feeling peace settle over her like a blanket. "Good night, my love," Zachary whispered. "Good night, my heart," Delilah whispered back. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, secure in a love that had stood the test of time and would continue beyond their mortal years through the family they'd created and the legacy they'd built. The years that followed their 50th anniversary were peaceful ones. Zachary's health continued its slow decline, but nothing dramatic, just the natural wearing down of a body that had worked hard for 7 decades. Delilah stayed strong, still tending her garden and keeping the household organized, though she moved slower than she once had. They spent their days surrounded by family, watching great-grandchildren play in the same yard where Emma and Thomas had once chased chickens. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching sunsets like they'd done since the beginning. They loved each other fiercely and tenderly, every day a gift they didn't take for granted. On a spring morning when wildflowers covered the Texas hills and the air smelled of rain and new growth, Zachary didn't wake up. He'd gone peacefully in his sleep, Delilah still in his arms where she'd been for 53 years of marriage. The grief was enormous, a tidal wave that threatened to pull Delilah under. But she was surrounded by the family they'd built, by love multiplied through generations, and they held her up when she couldn't stand on her own. At the funeral, the church was packed. People stood in the aisles and spilled out onto the street. Zachary Wells had touched countless lives through his kindness and integrity, but none more than the family he'd chosen to love. Thomas gave the eulogy, his voice strong despite his tears. "My father taught me what it means to be a man. Not through grand gestures, but through showing up every day. Through loving my mother and treating her as an equal partner. Through working hard and being honest and choosing kindness even when it was difficult. He wasn't my father by blood, but he was my father in every way that mattered. He promised to help raise me right, and he kept that promise until his last breath." Emma spoke next, her voice shaking. "He saved us. Thomas and me, we would have been lost without him. But more than that, he showed us what love looks like. Real, committed, everyday love that doesn't give up when things get hard. I hope he knew how much we loved him. How grateful we were that his horse threw a shoe outside Fort Worth all those years ago." Each of their biological children spoke, sharing memories and lessons learned. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren added their voices, creating a tapestry of love and remembrance that honored the man Zachary had been. Through it all, Delilah sat in the front pew, holding Emma's hand on one side and Rose's on the other, drawing strength from the family Zachary had helped her create. The pain of losing him was immense, but so was the gratitude for having had him at all. That night, alone in the house for the first time in over 5 decades, Delilah sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. She could almost feel Zachary beside her, his presence still tangible in the home they'd built together. "You kept your promise," she whispered to the night. "You helped me raise them right. You gave me a life more beautiful than I ever imagined. Thank you, my love. Thank you for stopping that night. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving me." The stars seemed to shine a little brighter, and Delilah chose to believe it was Zachary's way of saying he'd heard her. In the days and weeks that followed, Delilah found comfort in routine and family. She still tended her garden, though Thomas and his sons did the heavy work now. She still cooked Sunday dinners for whoever could make it, her kitchen filled with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about Zachary, keeping his memory alive for the youngest ones who'd barely known him. 6 months after Zachary's death, Emma came to visit and found Delilah sitting at the kitchen table with old photographs spread out before her. "What are you doing, Aunt Delilah?" remembering. "Look at this one, that's you and Thomas the first Christmas after Zachary and I were married." "You were so little." Emma sat beside her, looking at the faded image. "I remember that Christmas. Zachary carved Thomas a wooden horse and made me a doll cradle. I thought he was the most wonderful man in the world." "He was pretty wonderful," Delilah agreed, her voice soft. "I miss him every moment of every day." "I know you do, we all do, but he's still here, you know, in all of us, in the way Thomas runs the ranch with integrity, in the way my grandchildren are learning to be kind and work hard, in every person he touched with his goodness. That's a comfort." "Truly." Delilah reached for Emma's hand. "I want you to know something. Taking you and Thomas in, it was the best decision I ever made. Even before Zachary, even when I was struggling and scared, you two were worth it. You gave my life meaning. And you gave us everything. A home, security, love. Then you gave us Zachary, and he completed our family. I couldn't have asked for better parents." They sat together looking at photographs, sharing memories, laughing and crying in equal measure. It was healing, this remembering. It honored Zachary while celebrating the life he'd helped them all build. Delilah lived another 5 years after Zachary's death, remaining active and engaged with her family right up until the end. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79, she was surrounded by photographs of Zachary and the family they'd created together. They buried her beside Zachary on the hill overlooking the ranch, next to the graves of Delilah's sister and brother-in-law. The entire community turned out to honor a woman who'd become a pillar of strength and love in Fort Worth. At the funeral, Thomas stood before the gathered crowd and told the story one more time. The story of how his Aunt Delilah had taken him and Emma in when their parents died. How she'd struggled to keep the ranch going alone. How a cowboy named Zachary Wells had stopped one night asking for shelter and ended up staying for a lifetime. He said, "Let me help you raise them right," Thomas said, his voice carrying across the cemetery. And together they did. They raised us with love and discipline and faith and hard work. They showed us what commitment looks like, what partnership means, what family truly is. Everything good in my life, in Emma's life, in the lives of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, it all traces back to that night when my mother said yes to his help. When she was brave enough to accept love when it showed up unexpectedly on her doorstep. He paused, looking at the two graves side by side. They're together again now, back in each other's arms where they belonged, and their love lives on in all of us standing here today. That's the legacy they left us, not just land and cattle, but love that multiplies across generations. Love that endures beyond death. Love that changes the world one family at a time. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through Thomas's children and eventually his grandchildren. The house was expanded again and again to accommodate growing families, but the original structure remained, carefully preserved as a testament to the love story that had started there. Great-great-grandchildren played in the same yard where Emma and Thomas had once chased chickens, where Rose had learned to garden, where generations of children had grown up secure in the love Delilah and Zachary had established. The story of their love became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. how Delilah had been raising her sister's children alone, how Zachary had stopped for shelter and stayed for love, how together they'd built something that lasted far beyond their mortal lives. On the wall of the main house, preserved behind glass, hung the original ledger Delilah had been struggling with the night Zachary first knocked on her door. Beside it hung a photograph of their 50th wedding anniversary, Delilah and Zachary surrounded by their enormous family, love evident in every line of their faces. And on the porch, the rocking chairs where they'd spent countless evenings watching sunsets remained, often occupied by various family members who came seeking the peace and perspective that seemed to linger in that spot. The ranch prospered through changing times and economic shifts, remaining in the family through sheer determination, and the strong foundation Delilah and Zachary had established. Their descendants spread across Texas and beyond, but the ranch remained the heart of the family, the place where it all began. Every year on the anniversary of Delilah and Zachary's wedding, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. They'd share a meal, tell stories, and toast the memory of the two people who'd started it all. The youngest children would hear the story for the first time, eyes wide with wonder. The older ones would add details they remembered, keeping the legacy alive. And on those evenings, as the sun set over the Texas hills in shades of orange and gold, it was easy to imagine two figures sitting on the porch, hands entwined, watching the world they'd built together continue to flourish. The ranch stood as a testament to what two people could create when they chose love over fear, partnership over isolation, commitment over convenience. Delilah Morgan and Zachary Wells had built more than a ranch. They'd built a love story for the ages, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy that would endure as long as there were descendants to remember and honor what they'd created. Their story proved that sometimes the greatest love stories start with unexpected knocks on doors in the middle of the night. That sometimes the person you're meant to spend your life with shows up when you least expect it, offering help that transforms into so much more. That family isn't just about blood, but about the people who choose to love you and stand beside you through whatever life brings. And in the end, isn't that what we're all searching for? Someone who will see us struggling and say, "Let me help you." Someone who will stay when things get hard. Someone who will build a life with us, one day at a time, until those days add up to a lifetime of love. Delilah and Zachary found that in each other, and in doing so, created something beautiful that would ripple through time, touching lives for generations to come. Their love story became more than just their own. It became a beacon of hope, proof that love can heal, transform, and create miracles when given the chance to flourish. The ranch still stands today, a thriving testament to two people who took a chance on love and never looked back.